Kristen, I want to start with you. If you briefly can introduce yourself and tell the audience what you do and who you are.
Sure. Well, hi everyone.
Is it on?
Is this on?
I can use this. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Hello. Hi everybody. It's great to be here with you. I think this panel should be a lot of fun. I'm Kristen Grauman. I'm a professor at UT Austin in Department of Computer Science. Been there for about 18 years. And I've also spent time as a research director at Meta in the lab called FAIR, which is fundamental AI research. My specialty is computer vision. So a lot of work we're doing now is about video, video understanding, human activity, multimodal, between vision, language, audio, and some of our work will touch towards vision for action and robotics.
I'm Bryon Jacob. Studied AI in grad school 25 years ago in the late 90s, like more than 25 years ago in the late 90s. So it's a combination of symbolic AI and machine learning, which was until we were still doing basically linear algebra by hand at that point. I think was most of it. But I've worked a number of places. Most recently, I was the CTO and a founder of a company here in town called Data.World, which was basically data metadata management for large organizations, helping them organize data to actually build a semantic layer on top of that data and utilize it for AI use cases. For most of that run, it was more about predictive AI. The last couple of years, it was quite a bit more about how do we use that to integrate into generative AI use cases. And that company was just sold to ServiceNow a month ago, so now I work at ServiceNow. But
Congratulations on that acquisition. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Thanks to Hamid for setting this up and the team. My name is Eiman. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Protopia AI. We focus on data privacy solutions for AI in general. My background is in systems. I actually went to UT and did a PhD there in computer architecture. And after that, I worked at NVIDIA for about 10 years before starting the company. And it's great to be here with you guys, especially with people as accomplished as Bryon and Kristen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, folks. The first question that we all wonder is with the prediction and the bold prediction that is going on with the direction of AI, the future of AI. I want to know, Kristen, your perspective. Where are we really going?
The question was, where are we really going?
Yes.
Deep on so many levels, I think. Well, I think what's very exciting to me about where we are going in AI is towards two aspects of what's called embodied AI. So if you think about AI in a disembodied way, what does that mean? Well, it's thinking about being able to name things, classify things, talk about things. But once we talk about embodied AI, we mean that we have perception, so computer vision or other modalities, in the direct context of action. And so the two areas there that I think we're going, they're fantastic, are AR and MR, so augmented reality, mixed reality, where you are the human agent with a wearable device and your assistant is helping you along in different ways that need to be developed, and in robotics, where we have robots that are acting in the world and have perception and action loop. So when I think about, where are we going, I think we are certainly going there, but we have so much work to achieve what I just described.
Bryon, what are your takes on that?
I think I think we're definitely moving in a direction where AI is going to come into almost every aspect of almost everyone's life through definitely through embodiment is gonna be a big trend over the next decade and bring AI out into into more and more places. I think the thing that I think about a lot is we are very unevenly bringing everyone along for that. It was really, I saw the survey you did, and like over 50% in this room said you're expert users who use it all the time. That's the first time I've been in a room like this of people who came, who are like in a very tech forward city, who are here to hear about AI, where it was over 50%. So that's awesome. But even that, I think, as you kind of expand out, we are all in some version of a bubble, and if you as you go further and further outside that bubble, people are what I worry about where we're going, kind of to complement what Kristen said, is that we are concentrating knowledge, understanding the value that people are accruing from AI in a very small number of people, and the vast majority of people outside of those bubbles are dimly aware that this is all happening, and it's going to hit people really hard. So I think one of the things I worry about is, as a trend over the next few years, how do we actually democratize understanding and just, bringing people along for the ride better?
Yeah, I think to connect to what Kristen's kind of answer ended with in terms of the amount of work that it will take for a lot of this to become reality, and a lot of these really amazing outcomes that people either promise or talk about. I think there's a lot of underestimating how much work it is to get there, which by that, I mean fundamental work in delivering the solutions at scale to either consumers or kind of enterprise level access to it. Um, and from a perspective of where are we going, we're going to kind of this very amazing place that's being described, where we will deliver it to everybody's lives in the form of embedded, embodied AI, or otherwise in terms of just tooling. However, between here and there, there's a lot of pitfalls, and that requires people that are experts, if we're sitting in a room of people that are expert users, to be very aware of how they can help that go along. Because I think I hold a fairly controversial, I think, in the space of people working in this space, opinion that it is not a given that this round of the AI boom is going to make it. I think that we've been in an excited place of AI being something that has a lot of promise before in the past. This time we've made it much farther than that we've ever have made it before. But I don't think that it's a given that we are going to get there. I think it depends on solving those very hard problems, and it depends on people that are experts actually stepping up to do that.
Thank you so much, Iman. But of course, we have some trends, as you know. In the next 3 or 5 years, we're going to see some trends. Kristen, we do think what trends will appear in the next 3, 5 years in AI?
Yeah, so with my, academic faculty hat on, 3 to 5 years is near term. So I consider this question as like, what's really near term that's going to be important, achievable. And there, I think that the kind of, as I mentioned maybe a moment ago, the wearable augmented reality experiences that bring AI to become very much a personal assistant in everyday life and specialty scenarios that can see what you see, hear what you hear, and have your personalized context. I think bringing that together right now, this isn't something coming from nothing, but I think in 3 to 5 years, that's probably on the brink of what'll be, there and in our hands, and motivating a lot of good work.
Yep. Brian, what do you think?
So I think, I think one of the things we're seeing with like trends around, you know, how AI is getting incorporated into the enterprise, and I think we're starting to see already actual kind of workers who are actually AI agents really stepping in and doing significant jobs, and that's really powerful. But it's also worrying if we're not kind of balancing that out. I think what we're seeing with like certain professions, I mean, I'm heavily into software engineering. It's what I've always done, so it's the one I see. But like we're already kind of on ahead of the curve on. It's already just, I mean, undeniably true if you're in there doing this, that there's tools that are making good software engineers 10 to 100 times more effective at a wide array of tasks. Doesn't mean you don't need software engineering talent. It means that one good person can actually do 10 times or more as much work as they could do. And that fundamentally just is a big economic shift. And kind of playing off of a little bit of what you said, or I think, I think when you think about, is this the time that we get there? Is there another, like, what does there mean is maybe the question, because like there's no, like, if all AI progress stops right now, obviously it's not going to, but if all AI progress stopped right now, we've built a set of capabilities that have fundamentally shifted, like, and like where it gets, where the concern of maybe it all kind of comes to a halt again is like the amount of like essentially all tech investment has gotten poured into this, and so we've basically not just invested in what we already know we can definitely do, looking out at the near term, like 3, 5, 10 years. We're basically baking in this is going to fundamentally shift economics and investing as though it's gonna get several orders of magnitude more gains on top of it. That might not happen. That's what, and so I think you're right that it could all grind to a weird halt, but that's mostly because of the way we're just over eagerly pouring every dollar of every possible tech research into this one area, and it might have a near term local maxima that we hit. So I think, and that could cause real economic damage too.
Yeah, I really want to hear your feedback.
Yeah, no, I mean that's thanks for bringing that up. I think your question is very valid. Of like, what does there mean, right? And I think the answer to it lies in the fact that economically, um, we're holding up an entire economy on the promise that AI is going to deliver on making things more efficient, building things that we didn't have before. And it's not just in startups either. There's a really fun tweet I'll forward whoever wants to see it. But one of my favorite tweets about kind of how the pricing of the market has changed. There are things like, at this point, Nvidia stock has the death of the sun priced into it. Like, that's how far out we've gone in how we consider the value of these things. But what does that mean? That means that needs to become output into the world. Like, it needs to create real value into the world, as opposed to just a really nice tool that we can use even to improve software productivity. Like, not just that, it has to go a lot farther than that. And if it does get there, then this investment will have made sense, and maybe the economy does thrive multiple fold beyond that. But if it doesn't, the reallocation of kind of where the investments are, it will first need to find somewhere else to go. Right now, it hasn't really had a lot of places else to go. And at some point, it'll dry up, because if it doesn't return, that's how markets react, right? So I think that's where I think of when I think of, will it make it there, is will it make it to the point where this investment will have made sense and it will result in some bigger order outcome for humans in general, right?
I really love what you guys just mentioned, but with this, all the trends that going on right now, we're going to get prepared for that in the next 3, 5, 7, 10. But a lot of us right here, they're starting career or getting into something that it involves AI. What they should know and how they can prepare themselves when that time comes up. Kristen?
Yeah, so I think the question is what is important to know, especially as you're launching your career or
Exactly.
yeah, leaving school or changing careers. Yeah.
You have to prepare yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the things that come to mind for me, one thing is maybe certainly the reality is in technology that everything just, everything changes. So maybe the meta skill is being technically nimble and like willing and able to learn quickly. So that's certainly like a must, and have it come approaching work with that attitude. But another one that um, maybe it's not obvious, but I think so important, and I've observed it in my work and with my students, is the ability to write and communicate. And so no matter the part of AI or any part of tech that we go into, I feel like this is a strength that is a must. And so developing that in students is a must, like in the academic end, but for all of us. And I'm talking about writing of any form and communication of any form, because as I'm sure we've all experienced, if you have a great idea or if you have a great output, but you can't communicate that to your audience, then, it stops there. So I think of that as an important skill that we need to keep honing. Maybe the final thing that comes to mind for me for readiness is really um, coming into one's next position with the idea of thinking long term and thinking big, because especially when things in this field are moving fast and have these pretty remarkable successes, it could probably be tempting or natural to think shorter term, or just like, what can we turn around because we could just do it right here. And some of that has to happen, but yeah, when I think of someone entering the field, and myself and anyone else, like, just reminding ourselves not to be too greedy, I guess, in that way. I mean, in the idea space, and just trying to force ourselves to think ahead.
Thank you.
I think the two things I'm thinking are really just going to build on Kristen's points, because she's kind of said the fundamentals. I just, if you're thinking about how can I, how should I be leveraging AI to do whatever it is that I do, communication is using these tools. Again, I'm really happy to see this survey result, because I've actually asked that question informally at other panels like this, and only a handful of hands went up. So it's really great that the people in this room are engaged with this technology, use it. Your ability to actually communicate and form thoughts and have those conversations and figure out how those tools can apply to what you're doing. That's super important. If you're thinking about getting into AI itself as an industry, you want to build a startup, you want to build a company, you want to actually engage and build things with AI. I think the short term thinking is exactly the right framing, and maybe I'd elaborate on that. Say, like, I see a lot of entrepreneurs, engineers, early folks fall into this trap of, look, this thing that would have been impossible and required a feat of magic 3 years ago, I just did this in an hour and it was so easy for me. I'm going to go start a business and this is worth $1 billion. I'm like, no, it is now that easy for anyone to do that. You have to actually think two or three orders behind that. Like, if you're, if the idea, the thing that you can do is really just nothing more than a thin veneer on top of what anyone could go do with these AI tools, that's not a business, that's not a product, that's actually not a saleable idea. It's great for personal productivity like that. You haven't actually innovated a thing. You have to kind of figure out, how are you actually bringing some unique knowledge. Usually it's domain knowledge. What do you really know how to do? What are you an expert in that other people aren't? Bring that knowledge in conjunction with AI. Those are the kinds of things that are actually adding value.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great points there that Bryon you made. I'll just kind of emphasize one from the perspective of, like, what is good to focus on, as what set of skills to build, or what even kind of job is worthwhile doing. Very similar to what kind of company is worthwhile building. Um, there's a um, there's a quote of, like, it's important to think about any job and ask the question, why does this job even exist? Right? And if you can't find a good answer to why some person should be doing that job, given what these tools are capable of, then that's probably not something worth investing a lot of effort into. Rather, it would be a lot more meaningful to invest time into thinking, what is it that the tool can't do, but some person with domain knowledge, with access to certain data, what can you do with the tool, and what outcomes can you create that is specifically tied to some skill set that you're going to develop? That skill set is worthwhile going and developing. Because outside of that, like Bryan's saying, if one person can build an app that would take $10 million in a team of 10 and do that in an hour, so can everyone else. Right. And so at that point, it becomes, okay, the first person to do that will sell it off to a bigger company and they'll make some money. But then what's the point of focusing on that? And I think there's a strange analogy between building a business and taking a job in that way, in that the question would be, why does that business exist? The same question is, why does this job exist? So I think there's a layer of deeper thinking rather than just pointing to a skill set that's worthwhile. And then I want to also touch on something Kristen said about communication. Um, in the communication space, being able to create the words that are used to communicate something has become easier by a great deal. However, what those words actually mean to someone reading them has not necessarily become that much easier. I'll take just a moment to explain an experience I had in creating a couple of slides to explain something to a group of people that were not experts in that domain a while back. And when I first sat down to interact with a tool to help me create that content, in the first 30 minutes, I thought I'd done the work of 2 or 3 days of creating that content because of all the things that it gave back to me. But because of how high stakes that conversation would have been, I then spent time trying to figure out whether these words that it gave me and the pointers that it gave me to places in the internet were actually real and whether the logic of what I was trying to communicate would hold up. It took me an entire day after that 30 minutes to tease apart all the nonsense that it had put in there that either didn't make sense or was pointing to something that didn't even exist, very, very adamantly telling me that in such and such YouTube link at minute 23, this is what the person said. No such thing had happened in that video. And that just becomes a matter of communication is not just about creating the words and putting it in front of somebody. It becomes a matter of, is this thing that we're putting in front of other people to communicate what we think actually true? Does the logic hold up? I think a lot of those things are still very much human tasks as opposed to just relying on AI.
That was amazing, guy.
Did you learn something? Because lots of you are here that you think about the career, education, how you're going to implement AI to your career. But this is even for you. We have some people here, they are into startup. They're going to start the AI company. And a lot of them are popping up everywhere. And you, Bryon, as a software developer, having an idea and bring that idea to reality is not easy. It's totally different thing, especially with what's going on. Every morning you get up and something new is happening. For you, Eiman, what is your take on the scaling right now? From the creation, the idea, and the scaling it, how that works right now with all this stuff that's going on?
So the question's around scaling?
Yes.
So it's interesting you bring that topic up. I think let's just take the majority of what AI startups, that term is very overloaded, by the way, right? Like people call something an AI startup if it applies AI to a certain problem and creates an outcome. And in a lot of cases, it's deep tech that goes into building the AI tooling that other people use. All of those things are deemed AI startups. But the majority of the things out there are of the former group, meaning you're in real estate and you want to make the life of people working in real estate easier, and you're using AI tooling to do that, or you're in some other field. So a lot of cases we're talking about applications. I think in the application space, the topic of scaling is something that is overlooked a lot, or has been at least in the past few years, primarily because of what we were talking about earlier, in that investment has been aplenty in that space. There's been a lot of money poured into, oh, this thing is going to create some magic in a very important space. Let's go do that. Great. You start that way, but that road isn't very long. Very quickly, companies come across scaling problems that are tied to cost. And there's a lot of fundamental problems, again, in any of these industries that if they're not thought about from the beginning, the scaling part brings the whole thing to a screeching halt pretty quickly. And I think a lot of existing, very well-funded companies face that problem. This is not something that we're talking about, oh, just a handful of companies in some corner are facing. I think the problem of getting a product delivered at scale in a cost-efficient manner, that cost efficiency part is something that people turn a blind eye to. And it's something that really goes into the design of what you're doing from the beginning. Both from a business model perspective and from a technical perspective, but mostly from a business model perspective. That said, the only person here that's sold a big company, I think, is Bryon. So maybe
That's what I was going to ask you, Bryon. How did you scale it?
How did you exit?
Well, I would say, I mean, you ask if people want to start an AI company. I mean, right now, everyone is, if you're starting a company, it better be an AI company. It used to be, I have a better way to say it, because no one's investing money if it's not. Just, almost to, almost to a company. And also, I think it is a weird, it's a weird time to try to be any kind of like tech startup entrepreneur right now, like as opposed to 10 years ago when I started our company. I mean, so I think I certainly have some relevant insight there, but I don't think giving you what we did is actually what I would focus on saying right now. What I'd say, like, if you're, so first of all, I guess let me break down AI company a little bit, because I think it's an important distinction. Like, first of all, if you're actually an AI expert or have one who you're going to bring in, and potentially, and also maybe understand that, like, generative AI isn't the only AI on the block. It's the thing that's sucking all the air out of the room right now. But actually, I think a ton of the opportunity for AI companies that add real value is steering back a little bit to fundamentals and actually going and building really great predictive models on insert in on leveraging domain expertise, and maybe combining that with generative AI, which can be a really good orchestrator of that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of bridge that gap. And there's so much focus going into, I'm just going to tap into these large foundation models because I can use them and I don't have to actually know anything about how they work. And there's nothing wrong with that. I encourage everyone to do that, but if your business is a set of prompts on top of a foundation model, it's not a business. Like, just almost full stop. Beyond that, though, I think, I do think there's opportunity for a wide range of people to actually start meaningful businesses on generative AI without having to be an expert who can go train your own models and build those things out. I think it's a little bit what I said before. It's like, if you're bringing real subject matter expertise in a business, if your business is essentially taking a business you could go run yourself with human beings and doing all the work, and you make it 10 times more efficient than a competitive than the competition by leveraging AI in the operations, that's a really solid business. You build a platform that lets anyone who's running that kind of business do it 10 times more efficiently. That's actually probably a scalable SaaS business that could actually be venture invested and have a big exit. If that's the kind of company you're trying, like, that's where I would focus, is like, but you've really got to be honest with yourself. Like, am I dashing some AI on it because it looks cool, or could I really fundamentally go run this business with human labor turning the cranks, and I'm applying AI strategically with knowledge, and really importantly, so something I think going back to something you said, and doing so in a highly governed fashion where I'm not just spewing hallucinated text into somebody's critical workflow where real business is getting done, but you're actually governing every step of the flow. Those are the kind of businesses I think are more likely to get funded and way more likely to be successful.
Thank you so much. One of the questions that actually I always want to answer for it is this: does AI is going to take over? We all are scared. And the media, actually, believe it or not, most of the people are sitting here, they hear in the media, you hear that, oh, this is going to fake, thing, this area, that report, this news. Is it really happening? Or is it double-edged sword? Is it going to save us or kill us? We all don't know, because it's going so fast. But you guys, you are in it. Educational, software, you sell, scale the business, and you as well too. Where do you think guys would go? Really? Anyone, you can start.
I actually want to hear what Kristen right now.
This is very personal, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember how you first phrased it, but I don't think of this. I'm very optimistic. I'm not scared. I say that also knowing that, of course, we have to be smart, meaning anyone in tech, but we in concert with policymakers and so on. I think maybe why there's room to feel a different kind of different kind of nerves about it. It's obviously because of the pace of things that many of us didn't think would happen as quickly as they did. So that thinking, that policy making, okay, well, it needs to accelerate, right? So I think that's probably not debatable, right? I think we can feel confident about that being a necessity, but I feel optimistic about the capabilities that can come about and all the good that can come out of them. And so, I struggle with how to I mean, I can certainly appreciate the opposite feeling, but I struggle how to then combat it other than thinking positively about what are the things that can, you know, change the way we do things on all fronts of life, right? Not just um, in tech, but tech for, for economics, for social programs, for education, right? I mean, yeah. I mean, that optimism is very broad for me. So, but I'm very curious to hear what others are going to say. And I bet our
Bryon?
audience would have more to say about this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I am generally optimistic that we will figure it out, but not uniformly so. You know, if you think, and if you think about, yes, like, is AI going to take over? Like, well, one formulation of that is like, is it going to be like Terminator? Probably not, but that's not impossible. Is it going to be, is it going to be a like techno-feudal society with a small number of people controlling way too many of the resources and everyone else basically subjugated? Probably not, but that's definitely not impossible, and that's something we actually have to think about as a real outcome. I think, and I'm definitely aligned with the point of view that like we're not necessarily in this round of AI on a fast path to AGI or ASI or however you want to formulate it. But if you but I fundamentally think those things are possible. A lot of people will say LLMs can't be sentient machines, and I agree with that. An LLM alone is not sufficient. However, we have a lot of different there's a lot of different ways that there's a lot of different things that AI means, and this is a really important component of kind of a full autonomous AI. And I think we'll see, and like Kristen said, like we like this happened faster than I think most anyone who even is kind of deeply in the AI field thought in some ways. Like there are capabilities that we have right now today that I definitely didn't think we'd have at this point in time. So, it's hard to kind of it's hard to kind of say what that any particular outcome can't happen. I will say I'm more optimistic than pessimistic, and it's definitely there's enough paths to good outcomes that it's worth fighting for them. I'm definitely not, I know some people are kind of like, well, it's definitely going to just wreck us all, so nothing matters. I'm definitely more optimistic than pessimistic, but it's gonna take a lot of change. And I'll just say if anyone's really interested in this and kind of wants to see like the full range with full sci-fi craziness, but actually very well spelled out in really rational terms, there's a book called Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. If you want to kind of understand, like, what does somebody who's like a futurist who I think fundamentally is mostly an optimist, but definitely paints some very realistic, dystopian scenarios that are real. And it's my favorite book on the topic. So if anyone's interested in, I would pick that up. Life 3.0.
So, first of all, big sigh of relief that the robotics professor says we're not going to get killed by the robots. So
I
that's
love that.
good. That's why I kept looking at her closely while she was saying that. But no, jokes aside, I think one of the things that has been notable over the past, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years, is the desire to create the outcomes that we were talking about in the market, um, as it pertains to taking capability that is very rapidly progressing. And by that, I mean, we see the capability of something that we can all access on the internet getting better and better very fast. How that then is used in business and in enterprises and in places where there's a big collection of very sensitive information and data, the desire to put that capability to work in those places in order to create the outcomes that the market wants has led to what scares me the most today, which is partially why we are doing what we're doing at Protopia, is that there needs to be a rethinking of how systems take data and create those outcomes with the capabilities, because our systems were not designed for the manner in which we consume data and how that data is funneled around into different places in order to create outcomes. I think today we suffer from a lot of fingers crossed behind our backs, hoping nothing bad happens. And before robots take over, I think of our own doing, potentially as an industry, um, there are very bad cyber outcomes that can happen as a result of data being exposed in ways that it has never historically been, just because we wanted to create the outcomes, because if we don't, the investors are unhappy, and because if that happens, then this whole thing dries up. And so I think the thing that's a lot more concerning than Terminator is that we are not have not been so far. Not saying that is the case today, but in the past couple of years, we haven't been as focused on making sure how we are consuming the capability across different industries is aligned with best practices of how technology has been built for the past 100 years. And so that's the part that I think um, conservatism in the enterprise has actually been good. It has taken a long time for enterprises to get going with AI, but that's because, by definition, enterprises became enterprises by being risk averse, and that's kind of the natural balance that hopefully the rest of us in the field can utilize to build the safeguards necessary to not fall into that trap.
So, well, everything you said, just like one interesting one point that I think you can't ignore when you think about this, though, and I think you're leading up to it, which is like, but you think globally, like international, we talked a little bit about like regulation and should we do better at that, but like there's a real struggle, which is like you think about just internationally corporations and the intense competitive pressure that this puts that's put on companies to, once the capability is out of the bag, if you don't do it, your competition is going to, and you lose. Now translate that to countries. I won't name any particular countries and talk about any particular political belief, but some countries have a different point of view on their citizens' human rights and how they handle their data than others. And all the countries have the same fundamental technological capabilities. So if the differentiator is the data, you have these huge uneven, unbalanced, these huge imbalances. And then if you have only a subset of the world of the countries who are going to actually do responsible regulation and manage it, you just end up with this huge power imbalance. So I agree with everything you said, and yeah, no discrimination at all. But like this is one reason it's really really hard. Is like there's no unified we that can just decide to be more responsible with it.
Yeah, I'm actually following up on that. I'd be really curious to hear you guys' thoughts on the following. Regulation actually is probably not going to get us there. I'll put that out there. Mostly for the reason that you just described, right? If we're talking about competition in an economic way between companies, right, and some part doesn't actually care about those outcomes and another part does, regulation is going to get in the way of that competition, and that will probably slow things down to the point that, as we've seen, there's a lot of proponents for deregulating in order to let things speed up. But in the face of that, it comes back to what are the people building the technology doing to make what we're building safer by design, right? And I think in the kind of action plan that was announced a couple of weeks ago, I think those two things go hand in hand, and they have to. There's no other way. If you are going to soften regulation in order to speed up innovation, it has to be secure by design in some shape or form. And that those words mean nothing if the people building the technology don't make that part of what they're building. So I'm a lot more in the boat of it being safe is dependent on those building the technology in the field more than it is on regulation, because regulation is just never going to keep up. It's by design. Again, the systems of building regulation were not designed to keep up with this pace of anything. And so to that extent, the responsibility ends up falling on the builders of the technology. But I'm curious what the thoughts are.
Thank you so much, folks. But the best part of the panel is QA. I think we can have 4 or 5 questions. Hamid, you have the question you want me to ask?
So you have a Q&A, you can scan the QR code and also you can ask the email.
Yeah, I think the best way we'll do, guys, I think we can, the whole panel, if you have a question for Eiman or Kristen or Bryon, you can ask who's going to be first. Sir?
Heck, I have one question. Always you're talking about the AI and you compare it to the Terminator movie. It doesn't need to be like Terminator. It only needs to take over 10% of the job market. That's enough to make the whole society unstable. And I like to know your perspective on that. How much does it take for the AI to only take over 10% of the job market that we have, which makes the unemployment rate from 4.5% to 14.5%?
It's a question for...
And I'd like to know the thought, because
Okay.
we do not need actually the Terminator area to make everything unstable.
Great. Who's going to go first? Eiman? Anybody? You created robotic.
Well, I mean, I love the way you put the question and the putting a number on, the value of job loss that would be too damaging. I think that's important. I guess where my head goes is the reality is the jobs that we need to fill just do need to evolve and do need to change. And again, I can think of that in an optimistic way because, I mean, I'll put just from my individual perspective, research challenges that weren't even on the table anytime soon are now on the table. And so the work I did before, as research should go, it's become out of date, right? And so, or the things I teach in class, the same thing. And this is not a perfect analogy, but when I think about this challenge, I think, well, the hard thing that has to happen, but can happen, I believe, is that the way we factor work will evolve and we get more efficient at certain things. But you've talked about domain knowledge and things, and that's where the energy and the smarts have to go. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think way more disruption than 10% is completely inevitable and definitely going to happen with the current technology, even if we didn't keep making it better. I definitely along with Kristen's point of view that I mean, every technological wave prior, going back to, the multiple industrial revolutions, ultimately creates more jobs than it destroys. That's been true before every time. I think probably it'll be true again here. But the problem is the problem that's going to be a real problem that you're highlighting is the speed at which that happens has continued to accelerate. I mean, the last couple times it's happened with just the internet and the web, we displaced a whole bunch of jobs and we eventually replaced them. But people suffered it, in previous generations, it took 30, 40 years for those jobs to cycle out. And so we mostly didn't have a bunch of people lose their jobs. We had a bunch of people not go into those careers, and then people eventually retired and died, and it was fine, right? It was in and it wasn't always 100% fine. Some people always, there was always some suffering in that, but it was mostly kind of we mostly created enough new jobs to replace it. I think at the pace things are going, we're going to displace, I don't want to put a number on it, but I'll bet anything it's way higher than 10% of the global job market and not fill it in fast enough, because we will fill in fairly high-end jobs like software engineers and researchers. And with the software engineering, I can already see that it's mostly, it's in some cases, people are not getting jobs because AI is taking them. In more cases, companies are just doing 10 times as much, because it was always the case that I wanted to do 10 times as much as I could, and I had to pick and choose. And now I'm let's just do it all, because every engineer can do 10 times as much. I can't afford to hire 10 times as many people, but if you can do 10 times as much, I got work for you to do. That's true at a certain layer to your jobs. But I mean, I don't have a good answer other than your fear is real. That's way more likely than Terminator, I think, inevitable. And we're going to have to do something some kind of solve universal basic income is probably the only answer that's going to work in the short to midterm, because we're going to ruin too many people's lives if we don't.
Your take on that?
No, I just agree. We're happy to move on.
It's getting better. It's getting better. I love that. Why are you disagreeing?
No, I said I agree.
Oh, you agree. Sorry. I thought you were disagreeing. I said, oh, it's getting better, but you agree. Well, we got a great question here for you, Kristen. And it says there, how has Gen AI affected your CS classes and DMPT planning? Do you allow students to use it, and has the university blocked site to prevent plagiarism?
Yeah, so interestingly, I took a leave from teaching for 7 years. So actually, I've had the abrupt, like, the field changed, the tools changed, what students could do changed in that 7 years. But I did teach again for the first time after that 7 years in January. So definitely, I started to revisit my policy and looking at my colleagues and so on. So how's it affected my classes? I think one of the main things is for me to be aware that I want to have the ability to really know what students' work is and to give them, opportunities, whether it's for assessment or not, to reveal that to me, and so that I can assist their learning. So just to be concrete, when I have programming assignments, I taught a grad class earlier this year. It included a few programming assignments. I want them to have hands-on experience building things. But I also take into account that I need to be aware of the fact that, if they want to work their way around or, either accelerate the work or actually cheat on it, that can happen. And so in my assessment, maybe that matters less. It's going to be a learning experience for those who take it. But another thing I ask my students to do is write every week paper reviews. Here too is a place where you can imagine, yes, I can dump a PDF of a research paper and ask, and get some kind of thought. But I like to believe when I read them myself carefully, I can tell the difference. And so it's like giving those places where like unique thought can be exposed to, and I'm talking about a specific kind of class, a smaller graduate class, 30 students. But all that said, I think when I turn to undergrad teaching, I'll be more conscious of this as a risk for becoming a detriment to learning, because that's my concern. I mean, grades will be as fair as they can be with everything at my disposal, but learning could change if the ways we used to put forth assignments or exercises can be kind of skirted. The true learning process can be skirted. So I think it's a great question, but again, I'm pretty optimistic. I think the final part of that question, yes, I think both in students' classes as well as in academic papers, there's a whole lot of talk about this for the review process of papers, right? I mean, there is, if we're talking about like the Terminator, okay, what's the more benign sounding but still very real version of Terminator disaster is like, or do you think it is a disaster, but AI agents writing papers being reviewed by other AI agents, right, and becoming the state of the art? I mean, this is something that's on like in front of us. And so thinking about, right now, I mean, in a nutshell, how we try to put forth policy for that is that, writing assistance, not a problem and probably useful, but actual substance of the thought, people are agreeing to code of conducts for having the actual thought, whether you're a student in a classroom or a reviewer in the field.
Thank you so much, Christian. I really want to get to the other question, folks, but we don't have that much time. We have until 8 p.m. and I want all of you to start connecting and talking to each other, get to know each other. If you have questions on the side for our panel here as well. But I want to say thank you for all of you for being here. Really, we really appreciate it. It means a lot to all of us.